Hey guys, what is up and welcome to another Tesla update video. So today, as per usual, let's go over Tesla and let's go over this kangaroo market essentially that we are in right now with tariff Trump. Tariffs left and right, tariff this, tariff that. He's tariffing everything. At this point, honestly, I think our water is going to get tariffed. Our air is going to get tariffed. Well, I live in Canada, but I'm sure my air will somehow get tariffed as well. Everything's getting tariffed. So we'll go over the market. We'll go over my thoughts on Tesla stock, what we can expect moving forward and all that stuff. So if you enjoy, don't forget to hit that like button. This is not financial advice. I am not a financial advisor. And of course, if you enjoy my technical analysis, thoughts on the charts, etc., despite this market definitely being a difficult one for sure right now, the last week or so, pretty difficult. Nonetheless, though, obviously, I share my thoughts with my members, especially on these, obviously difficult days, we'll say. So definitely check it out. That link is down below. For just $3 a month, mainly on Tesla stock, sometimes other stocks, of course. And for $5 a month, you get access to everything I just mentioned in the first tier, plus NVIDIA daily updates. But jumping into it, Tesla closing the day down about almost 4.5%, we'll say, closing at 272 per share, which of course is going to be compared to the market. Definitely an underperformance, right? Tesla coming in pretty weak pre-market. Actually recovered a large. It actually almost went green, right? In fact, yeah, pretty much almost went green. Maybe slightly, no, it didn't actually go green, but it was like 0.1% away from going green. And unfortunately, the last 30 minutes of the day, the whole market, not just Tesla, pretty much took a poopsie doopsies all the way back down and erased, the majority of the climb that we experienced today, unfortunately, right? It is what it is sometimes like that. But yeah, so let's go over what Tesla needs to do essentially moving forward. And yeah, so start with the 1 hour chart. The 1 hour chart, before we bring out any indicators, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, sometimes, just simple price action can tell enough of a story. And the simple price action that we're seeing right now on Tesla stock, hard to believe we were at 325. This right here was 325. It feels like it was, I don't know, to me, it feels like it was a month ago. It was not that long ago. We were just up here. How much of a drop is that? I'm just out of curiosity. It's crazy how 16% drop. Pretty unbelievable how aggressive this market's moving. Like you have NVIDIA moving up and down, from peak to trough, essentially like 9% almost daily for the last 4 days. Like we're in a very much of a kangaroo market here. So, hey, be careful if you're playing a short-term plays. That's all I'm going to say. But nonetheless, oops, I actually deleted it. Oh, I'll redraw it. Going to the 1 hour chart, right? Sometimes, simple price action is, can often tell a decent part of the story. And this is kind of what we're experiencing on Tesla here, right? So you can see for Tesla stock, right? The last, what was this? From last Tuesday, pretty much, honestly, a good portion of last week, right? The majority of last week, ultimately, we held this general area, right? We held this general area, about like the high 280s to like almost like the low-ish 280s, right? Like the 280s, we'll say in general, has held us pretty well all of last week. Unfortunately, we had that massive gap down today on, news, of course. Tariffs officially began. That's number one, right? So tariffs are still there, or rather have actually begun. And of course, there was a note about Tesla's sales in China, I believe it was. Dropping by a good amount, though, to be fair, the Model Y is getting that new, the new Model Y is coming out in China, right? So that, the production line and whatnot is pretty much closed while that's getting changed over to that. So, in my opinion, it's a little bit of a misleading news, but nonetheless, just combine everything together, especially in a weak market, and Tesla, of course, being pretty weak overall, naturally, it doesn't take much to bring it down, right? So we did get a pretty decent gap down. Now the market is rebounding after hours right now. So we'll see how the market ultimately rebounds into opening up tomorrow. But you have to understand the fact that Trump apparently is speaking tonight, so watch out for that. But the point I'm just trying to bring, I'm kind of going off on a different topic here, but the point I'm just trying to bring out is the fact that you can see this area held us as support for, the majority of last week. We obviously broke down below, came back into it. And unfortunately, so far, keyword is so far, finding it as a bit of a resistance, right? And obviously getting a bit of that rejection. So what does Tesla ultimately need to do, at least in the shorter time frame, to at the very least stop the bleeding on the short time frame, right? For things to calm down, at least to a certain extent, right? What needs to be done? Well, we need to essentially not constantly break down, take essentially previous levels that were support and turn them into resistance, and then, break down even further, right? We're constantly just doing this chain of reactions where we're constantly breaking down, right? Taking these levels back that were support, and, we're just going lower and lower and lower. Like this chain needs to stop. So what can be something that actually stops this chain? Well, essentially a reclaim of this level, right? Tesla needs to reclaim, honestly, about the mid 280s, really, right? About the mid 280s, which is pretty much where we got rejected today. We need to reclaim that on the 1 hour, for instance, right? We need to get back up above these levels so that when we come back like this, it ends up taking this level and turning it back into support, right? That needs to happen. If that can start happening, I think Tesla stock, at the very least, will, at the bare minimum, in my opinion, of course, not financial advice, the bleeding should subside, or at the very least substantially slow down, because we'll kind of break that chain of events where we're just essentially constantly stair stepping down over and over and over. We've been doing this pretty much since, since arguably, the 400s, right? Even on the 1 hour, we get this move to the downside, take this area right here, you can see, turn into resistance, down, take this area, resistance. It took a while, but ultimately down, resistance, right? Again, same area, resistance. Now, we couldn't even get a run back to 325. I was expecting at least a 325 run back to turn this into a resistance. We couldn't even get that. And back down, and now we're kind of doing the same thing. Now we're doing it on smaller and smaller time frames. You can see the one thing to note that's potentially a pretty important information is each time we got that breakdown, we had a long consolidation, then we had a decent consolidation, a slightly shorter consolidation. But the point is that each time we broke down, came up and we tested that, we've consolidated less and less and less, which could be a good sign. The fact that this, pain train should be closer to an end than not. Because we're constantly consolidating less and less and less, right? So, there's a bit of less kind of distribution essentially happening, which could be a good sign, but ultimately price action is what actually matters in terms of levels. So like I said, about the 385-ish range, about the mid 380s, that needs to be reclaimed on Tesla stock. If that can be reclaimed on Tesla stock, we can be a lot more confident that at least in the shorter time frames, hey, you know what? Maybe we're finally done bleeding this aggressively, right? Let's go over to the daily chart really quickly, right? So the daily, you can see we're actually just, we're barely hanging on to the bottom of the trend line, right? We're barely hanging on to the bottom of the trend line, but more importantly, we actually came down pretty darn close, if not arguably there, to the bottom of the weekly support trend line that we have bounced off of several times before. You can see right here, right? Several times before the support has held. And so far, we're finding at least somewhat of a bounce, especially relative to how we opened up in the morning. So obviously, we'll see how this actually plays out, towards the end of the week. It is a weekly candle, keep in mind. But so far, not too bad. Now, the one thing I want to quickly point out that's pretty interesting is the fact that, remember, technically speaking, we could make history on Tesla stock this week. What is that history? Well, if you've forgotten, again, Tesla stock right here, you can see the stock has literally not even like making this up, but it quite literally has never, you can see we're actually below that. This is the weekly time frame on the history of Tesla stock. It has never had, I believe 7, I think we're on the 7th right now. It has never had 7 in a row of lower closure weekly candles in a row, consecutive ones, right? Ever. Like it's quite literally never happened, even in the worst sell-offs ever. At the very least, it's found some level of bounces, or at least a stalling without just a continuation of pretty aggressive bleeding essentially, right? We have never seen 7 in a row. We are on week 7. So in other words, if Tesla happens to close this week below last week's close, which was about pretty much 293. If we close this week below 293, we've pretty much made history. Right? That has never happened before. So let's see if we end up doing, what seems to be pretty much the impossible and make history on the stock. That's something else to watch out for. We'll see how the week closes out. Again, it's a pretty volatile week. Honestly, even closing above 393. It's not impossible. It's not completely out of the question with how just really, really volatile the market has been lately, right? Just very, very aggressive swings up and down, for better or for worse. I mean, mostly for worse, but nonetheless aggressive regardless, right? So, that's a pretty interesting stat. Let's see how that ultimately plays out. But yeah, with this kind of closure, and as long as we remain below 285, we can continue essentially hugging the bottom of this line, this kind of bottom trend line, which, can still see us, come back down, into the mid to high 260s as early as tomorrow. So watch out for that, right? But that's just something to watch out for moving forward. Essentially, we need to reclaim the 285s. Tesla bulls need to do that. And the sooner they do that, the better for the stock. We are still technically making bullish divergences where obviously we're making these lower lows while the RSI is obviously making these higher lows, which is a good sign, right? If I bring out the bands and the indicators, you can see, we're still extremely, extremely oversold, right? We're still extremely far away from the mean to the south side, of course, right? Kind of just like how we were all the way up here, very far away. Now we're very far away, but on the opposite side of the spectrum. Now, obviously, you are still technically catching a knife, but, at least you'll be catching a knife in, again, that weekly massive support zone like I've been talking about for quite some time. You can see this kind of zone right here. I can even kind of like delete it, and you can get a little bit of a better view. Like if I just draw kind of like a line across like this, you can kind of get a little bit of a simple perspective of just how many times this area has proven a resistance, and now we're coming back into it. And yeah, it's scary, yeah, it's aggressive, yeah, it's pretty fierce, but again, just emotions aside, technically speaking, we are still looking at this area as a massive area of support because it was a substantial multi-week, multi-month, even multi-quarter on multiple instances level of resistance. Like this wasn't just some tiny resistance that we had 1 or 2 weekly candles. Like this is a very substantial one, which again, with everything aligning, again, you never know in this market. You never know with Trump, being the way he is right now. But I'd still be pretty surprised if we just break down below this support level that, we're now turning into support that was a resistance. Again, pretty much around the levels that we are right now, give or take, right? There's no exact level. It's not a perfect level, but this general range that we're trading in right now, that still hasn't changed, right? That's that picture remains to be as is, right? So just keep that in mind, right? I know it's it's pretty spooky, and it is pretty spooky for me at times too. Seeing just consistently aggressive red and any buying pressure is just completely sold off. Yeah, it can be hard in the mental. That's just that's what the market that's what it wants to do, right? It's trying to make you fold. It really wants you to fold. It wants you to panic. It wants you to freak out, and it wants you to do these things, right? It's kind of what it's made to do, right? So let's see how this actually ultimately plays out. But all these factors are still present. Despite all these very aggressive moves to the downside that we're even still experiencing, nothing really changed with the kind of more zoomed out picture. The last thing I want to talk about is, of course, something that I'm starting to bring out once again, with the market like this, which is the EMA strat, right? We have the 9 EMA, you have the 21 EMA, and you have the 50 EMA being the green, red, white lines respectively, right? So what do you do with this, right? Well, kind of like, when Tesla was rocketing back up to the 400s over here, right? You can see, once it had that bullish crossover on the EMA right over here, right? Essentially not only the 21 or the 8 crossed the 21, but it also both of them went back above the 50 moving average, the EMA, right? 50 exponential moving average. We had that massive move up. And what happened on this massive move up that was a very, very parabolic. Like if this hurts for the longs, imagine how much this hurt for the shorts, right? But the point I'm trying to make is the fact that you can see this green line, which is that 8 EMA, look how well it held it on this entire uptrend. And only once we started losing it, did this uptrend really start to lose that momentum, right? Once we really start to lose that 8 EMA, yeah, we had that move back up still, but ultimately the point is the fact that the uptrend really started to lose that steam, right? We really started to falter once that 8 EMA really got lost, right? And we really lost that access, uptrend support essentially is what I'm trying to say. Exact same thing applies, but to the downside, right? Same kind of principle, right? You can see same idea. Not only did the 21 and the 9 EMA over here cross bearish, where the weakness really started to slowly set in, but once we started losing that 50 EMA and both of the moving averages crossed below, that weakness only further got, extended to the downside, unfortunately, right? And you can see once this really aggressive selling pressure began, we can't even get back above the 9 EMA or the 8 EMA, right? We're finding rejection at it several times in a row. Like we just can't get back above. So what else could be done for Tesla stock, at least on the daily chart, to make things a little bit more, palatable and, less, less aggressive to the downside, I guess, on top of course, that 1 hour, like I mentioned, about the 285-ish region getting recaptured, which will be important. It also will, of course, be pretty much recapturing the 8 EMA on the daily chart, getting a daily candle closure above that, which at the moment sits at about 300. It'll be a little bit lower tomorrow, so probably like mid to high 290s tomorrow, something like that. We need to close above it because you can see we can't get any candle closure above it. We're having issues over and over and over of closing back above it, and that's not what we want to be seeing, right? We want to be seeing this, close back above. So watch for these factors, right? Watch for these factors. These are the factors that I'm looking at the very least to stop the bleeding. In order for Tesla to really resume the uptrend and to really, potentially even make all-time highs or anything like that, or, to even consider talking about all-time highs, we need to flip these pretty much the exact opposite way. We need to recapture them and they need to flip back the opposite direction, which unfortunately it will take some time. That's not going to happen overnight, but that probably will happen with a break out of this channel at this point, if we even get it, right? So at some point, which, is pretty much around the mid 300s, which is, a little bit of a ways away, but nonetheless, at the very least, again, to stop the bleeding, we want to recapture this 9 or this 8 EMA. So let's let that happen. Let's, this is the time that patience is required. I mean, I think non-financial advice, adding on, very aggressive dips at major support zones, like, we pretty much are at right now. I don't think it's a bad strat, but for someone that's more risk adverse, of course, like I said, again, not financial advice, waiting for at the very least the 9 EMA or 8 EMA, whatever, 9, 8, same thing, to get recaptured, wouldn't be a horrible idea either, right? Just keep that in mind. But nonetheless, thanks for watching. See you tomorrow. Peace.